Hey folks, David Glenn here from the North Carolina Sports Network. Join us at the first ever North Carolina Sports Network Bacon and Baseball event presented by the North Carolina Pork Council. The event is set for Friday night, May 3rd at UNCW's Brooks Field as the Seahawks open a huge Coastal Athletic Association series against in-state rival and fellow CAA contender Campbell. Get your tickets now for this huge three-game Friday, Saturday, Sunday CAA baseball series between UNCW Seahawks and the Campbell Fightin' Camels. We get it started on Friday night, so come out and meet me, David Glenn, and the rest of our North Carolina Sports Network crew, where we will be talking baseball and taping content with fans before and during the Camels-Seahawks game. We will have lots of giveaways for fans, including bacon and baseball t-shirts and stickers while they last. We'll also be providing some great North Carolina pork sandwiches, courtesy of the North Carolina Pork Council and our friends at Jimmy's Wrightsville Beach in conjunction with UNCW Athletics. It's the first ever North Carolina Sports Network Bacon and Baseball event presented by the North Carolina Pork Council and the three-game CAA baseball series between the UNCW Seahawks and the Campbell Fightin' Camels. For ticket information, go to uncwsports.com/buy tickets.
It's May, it's spring, it's North Carolina, and we are talking basketball here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm Mike Waddell along with David Glenn. May 1st, the last day for college basketball players to enter the transfer portal, and a lot of change has been going on in this new era of college hoops since the end of the Final Four in Phoenix. David Glenn, we're the North Carolina Sports Network. We're focused on the Big Four, Duke, NC State, Wake, and Carolina right here. But what team around the nation beyond the boundaries of the Atlantic Coast Conference has really caught your attention since the end of the college basketball season?
Well, Mike, it's always great to be with you. And the fun part about doing this exercise in May compared to, say, trying to do it in mid or early April is that back then, some of these ACC schools truly didn't have a single player on their entire roster. So there was nothing to analyze. Here in the month of May, some teams actually know 11 or 12 of the 13 scholarship players that they'll have this fall if they get to 13. Just about everybody knows at least 8 or 9 of the scholarship players they'll have on hand, of course, and that's in a sport where the NCAA mandates a maximum of 13 scholarships. So we're at least at the point in May that we can have a semi-intelligent conversation about which teams look really, really good at this still early stage and which ones either don't look very good or have a lot of work to do in the transfer portal moving forward. As you said, you have until May 1st to put your name in. You don't have to decide on your new school by May 1st. So we're going to see these decisions continue throughout May and even later than that. To answer your question, Louisville is the one program that has jolted me the most. Now, there are good things at the in-state schools too, and we'll get to those. But the new head coach of the Louisville Cardinals, a proud national championship caliber program in its long history, right? Denny Crum, Rick Pitino, and otherwise. They just had two of the worst seasons in the history of Louisville basketball. And I would argue that Pat Kelsey, the new head coach, formerly of College of Charleston, formerly of Winthrop, he did a great job in both of those places. Pat Kelsey has done more in 1 month to energize the Louisville program than the recently fired Kenny Payne did in his 2 full seasons with the Cardinals. Louisville had 12 scholarship players enter the transfer portal during that school's coaching transition. That is essentially your entire roster. However, because of Pat Kelsey's quick work in the transfer portal, the Cardinals will be at the very least a competitive team, in my opinion, this coming season. And they might even be a really good team next season because they're not done yet in the portal. And that is, in the aftermath of 2 of the worst seasons in school history, 4-28 2 years ago under Kenny Payne, 8-24 this past season under Kenny Payne. Both times, by the way, the Cardinals were dead last in that 15-team version of the ACC that is about to grow to 18 this summer. Their probable starting point guard at Louisville is a guy named Chucky Hepburn. ACC fans may not know a lot about him, but he was a 3-year starter for the Wisconsin Badgers in the Big Ten. Really good distributor, really good defender, obviously a very experienced player from a very good basketball league. Louisville's 2 wing players both said actually that they're going to test the 2024 NBA draft waters, so they certainly have talent enough to draw the attention of professional scouts, but they have committed to the Cardinals, and when the NBA just recently announced its early entry, even testing the waters list, neither of these names was on the list, which sounds like these guys are ready to play for the Cardinals after flirting with the NBA. One is Terrence Edwards Jr. He was the Sun Belt Player of the Year last season at James Madison University, 17 points per game for the Dukes, also a really good passer. Another NBA prospect down the road, a guy named Abubakar Traore. He was a first-team All-Big West player last season at Long Beach State, 12 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, not a great shooter, but a slasher, a scorer, a passer, also a very good defender. 2 more wing players, again, all through the transfer portal, Javon Hadley of Colorado and a guy named Rain Smith from College of Charleston. He followed Pat Kelsey from Charleston to Louisville. These guys were both also double-digit scorers last year at their previous school. They both also happened to be, Hadley and Smith, really good three-point shooters in the 40% range. So right now, and this could change daily, right? Louisville has signed 8 or 9 major college transfers. And in my eyes, in a matter of just a little bit more than a month or so, the Cardinals have gone from what would have been an easy pick to finish dead last in the ACC again to a team, thanks to Pat Kelsey and his staff, that is capable of contending for an NCAA tournament bid. If you can do that in 30 or so days, you deserve some kind of prize. I will add that the Cardinals have to improve their front court and their post play if they're going to have a really well-rounded rotation inside, outside. But that's why they're still active in the portal right now. And they are not done yet. They've impressed me that much with their first 8 or 9 incoming transfers. But they're going to be adding to that rotation for Pat Kelsey, who's done about as good a job as you could ask of any new ACC head coach.
David, when you look at the players going out of the ACC with the portal and then coming in through both high school recruiting and the portal, you're telling us who might be doing some great things over in Kentucky, but who are some of the programs that we need to keep an eye on right now that might be showing you some warning signs or red flags?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. And right now, again, this can change in a week or two, but I would put Boston College on that red flag list. I would put Florida State on that red flag list. I would put Virginia Tech on that red flag list. And there is also the case of the Cal Bears, if you want to include incoming ACC teams. They have lost a lot of talent as well. But the Eagles, Earl Grant is going to be entering his 4th season at BC this fall, and it's hard to paint a pretty picture in Chestnut Hill right now. Since the end of this past season, which was Grant's best so far with the Eagles, 20 wins, NIT bid, BC has lost all 5 starters. Now, it's one thing when your best player, all ACC big man Quentin Post, happens to be a senior, a COVID-plus senior. He exhausted his eligibility. That's nobody's fault. That happens everywhere. No red flag in that regard. However, it is another thing, and in my eyes, it is a warning sign blinking at all of us when the other 4 starters at Boston College, and I mean including some pretty darn good players, they all opt to leave even though they have starting positions at BC and they've been playing a lot of minutes with the Eagles. That is the definition of a red flag. Now, BC insiders may know how much of this is connected to player-coach relations, player-player relations, chemistry in the locker room relations. Is BC not throwing around name, image, likeness money to even its best players? And maybe these guys are getting it somewhere else. Maybe they're tired of not winning enough, right? BC hasn't been to many NCAA tournaments in a long time. But listen to this list, because these guys can play, and they've all ended up at good schools which underlines the fact that other coaches can see that these guys can play. So again, Quentin Post out of eligibility, nobody's fault. Starting point guard Jaden Zachary, who in my opinion has just been a cut below an all ACC honoree, really good, maybe not all conference, but really good for the Eagles as a starter these past couple seasons. He's transferring to the Clemson Tigers. Brad Brownell's got a pretty good eye for talent that fits his system, as he showed in that run to the Elite Eight. Jaden Zachary, instead of being a returning starter with tons of experience in Earl Grant's system, he's going to be playing for the Clemson Tigers in the ACC instead. Oh, by the way, starting wing guard Claudell Harris Jr., really good shooter. He's transferring to Mississippi State of the SEC. Starting forward Devin McLaughlin. I haven't seen him pick a new school yet, but he's transferring away from Chestnut Hill. Starting forward Prince Aligbe has already picked Seton Hall of the Big East, which we call, a Power 6 conference in the sport of men's basketball. Backup guard Mason Madsen, another nice experienced player who can shoot. He's transferring to Utah. Whatever the explanation is, it is a major red flag when you have 4 starters with eligibility remaining and they all decide to leave and they all end up at other major conference programs. I am not close enough to that locker room to know the problem here. Who doesn't like whom? What is going on? Are they getting more money somewhere else? I don't know. I don't have all those answers, and there may be different explanations for each departing player. But you simply cannot compete in the Atlantic Coast Conference when your best players all decide to leave, even after a 20-win season, where the Eagles did show progress from 2 horrible years under Earl Grant to at least that NIT bid that I mentioned. The original Saltworks has become a legendary breakfast, brunch, and lunch place in Wilmington for both locals and out-of-town visitors over the last 50-plus years. Our good friend Bob Hubbard owns the place, but he's also the one cooking your food and often roaming the dining room to greet you with a smile and to make sure your visit is a great one. Bob has been running the show at this unique roadside diner for more than 20 years now, and he and his friendly, hardworking staff aim to treat you like one of their own. Try Bob's homemade omelets or special recipe grits for breakfast or his legendary cheeseburgers for lunch. The original Saltworks, your breakfast and lunch choice on Oleander Drive in Wilmington.
We didn't wait very long before jumping right in to the 2024-25 college basketball season. He's David Glenn, going into his 38th year of covering college basketball here in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And David, when you look at the Tar Heels of North Carolina, man, they did really well in the portal, and that was just getting back Seth Trimble and keeping R.J. Davis. The Tar Heels are pretty unchanged from a year ago.
Yeah, Mike, I follow very closely all 18 now ACC teams. We write about it a lot, and we encourage folks to check out our website, ncsportsnetwork.com, where we have a running list of everybody who has left these ACC schools and where they've committed elsewhere, but also all the incoming guys, as you said at the top of the show, from both high school and the transfer portal. And I can say this about Carolina as we jump into the Tar Heels picture. There is only one out of 18 ACC schools that did not lose anyone of significance to the transfer portal, and it is the Tar Heels. You mentioned Seth Trimble. I consider him a valuable reserve for Carolina in the backcourt. He put his name in. He started looking around. He ended up putting out a statement saying how it made him realize that Chapel Hill was home. And, of course, he withdrew from the transfer portal. He will be a part of the Tar Heels next season. The only guy who left Carolina among the scholarship players left early. I mean, obviously, Armando Bacot and Paxson Wojcik and Cormac Ryan were out of eligibility. They're leaving the traditional way. Harrison Ingram entered the NBA draft early. And while he technically retained his college eligibility, he did make clear that he intends to play in the NBA next year. So that's become another traditional departure, obviously, at a school like Carolina, guys leaving early for the NBA. But among those contemplating the portal, everybody stayed except for a guy who wasn't going to play next year. And that's really good news for Hubert Davis. This is, I think, a preseason top 10 team. They were highly regarded last year, and they did deliver, not in every way, but they won the ACC regular season championship. They went to the Sweet 16. They played in the ACC title game. Those are some accomplishments, glorious accomplishments at some schools, obviously maybe second-tier accomplishments at a school like UNC, given its history. But the Tar Heels basically have one of the best backcourts in the country. Look at it this way. There are 5 or 6 guys that can really play. We often talk about needing quality guards in March. Assuming good health, Carolina is loaded in the backcourt. ACC Player of the Year and first-team All-American R.J. Davis is back for his 5th season in Carolina Blue. Obviously, everybody knows about the COVID rules that gave everybody the opportunity from that pandemic season to celebrate another year of college basketball if they choose. RJ decided to exercise that option for the coming season, the way a guy like Armando Bacot just played his 5th and final season for the Tar Heels last year. But wait, there's more. Elliot Cadeau, starting point guard, a guy who built very good chemistry with RJ Davis. All of RJ's numbers were better when Elliot Cadeau was on the court this past season than when Cadeau was on the bench. RJ's numbers went up. He's just a much more efficient player playing next to Elliot Cadeau than he was playing, for example, against Caleb Love, the human roller coaster of college basketball, as Arizona got to experience this year after the Tar Heels experienced very high highs, but also very low lows when Caleb Love was one of the guys that they were counting on most. I see a lot of reliability in this backcourt. R.J. Davis, the 5th-year senior, Elliot Cadeau, assumedly will be a better version of himself as a sophomore. Does a lot of things well already. Great court vision, great ball handling, great passing skills. He can beat his man off the dribble. He has pretty good footwork on defense. We all know he just can't shoot. And I imagine you're going to spend a ton of time on that three-pointer and even his free throws during the offseason because it grew to the point almost of embarrassment the way opponents were sagging away from him when he had the ball on the perimeter in the NCAA tournament and even some games leading up to that. Seth Trimble is back as a high-flying, fast-break phenom, as another ball handler, as an improved shooter. He was much better from three-point land and the free throw line this past season than he was previously for the Tar Heels. Just a much better all-around two-way player. Oh, by the way, Ian Jackson was a McDonald's All-American, 6'5", not a great shooter yet, but a very creative offensive player who could score and pass the ball. Drake Powell was another McDonald's All-American. He's part of this new backcourt. And I need to add this to fill out the picture of those 6 quality guards. I saw some Carolina fans trying to compare the signing out of the transfer portal of Cade Tyson from Belmont to Paxson Wojcik of this past year's team. I'm telling you, I watched Paxson Wojcik in the Ivy League, and I've watched Cade Tyson in the Missouri Valley Conference. Number one, those two leagues are not very compatible. The Missouri Valley Conference, where Cade Tyson, new Tar Heel, formerly of Belmont, was one of the top 10 leagues in college basketball this past season. There's 32 leagues, and the Missouri Valley was 9th or 10th. That's a pretty good league. I have never seen the Ivy League in the top 10 of college basketball's conferences when they're ranked from 1 to 32. Ivy League, solid conference. Missouri Valley, much better than solid conference. You're playing with and against better players, and that makes a second-team All-Missouri Valley Conference honoree like Cade Tyson much more impressive, in my opinion, as a guy who watched both, than any expectation of Paxson Wojcik, who did start at the beginning of the season for the Tar Heels this past year before Hubert Davis realized that Paxson Wojcik was not ready for that kind of a big role the way apparently Hubert had guessed he would be on the recruiting trail. Otherwise, Paxson would not have been starting so much. But the reality is those are 6 really promising guards. Cade Tyson shot 47% from three-point land last year. So they all have different skill sets, right? Trimble as a defender and a high-flying dunker and a stunning athlete. Cadeau as the ball handler and the distributor. R.J. Davis, obviously first-team All-American. Jackson has that New York City game. Drake Powell is a North Carolinian who has an edge to his game. Cade Tyson can flat-out shoot the rock. Anybody who remembers Hunter Tyson, who played at Clemson, that guy was infinitely better at the end of his time with Brad Brownell than he was at the beginning of his time with Brad Brownell at Clemson. His brother, Cade Tyson, seems to have a similar work ethic. He was better in his second year at Belmont than he was in his first. And Hunter Tyson, for those who forget, went from a middling recruit to becoming an NBA basketball player. There's something in that family where they're doing things right. So Cade Tyson, in my opinion, should not be compared to Paxton Wojcik. I mean, there are a couple of white guys who play on the wing. I mean, is that leads to too many false conclusions about what they have to offer. Of course, the Heels would like more help in the post. Jalen Washington is back. Wonderfully talented offensive player, not yet a great defender. Jalen Withers, talented athletic defender, not a great offensive player. Zayden High is back. James Brown is an incoming freshman. The Heels really want a big man out of the transfer portal. Without adding a big man, they'll still be a really good team. But as you and I have this conversation, Mike, a Rutgers center named Cliff Omori is visiting Chapel Hill. He's been two-time All-Big Ten defensive team for the Scarlet Knights. He made second team All-Big Ten, not defense, but All-Big Ten second team year before last, just as an all-around fantastic player at Rutgers. He's 6'11", he's 240 pounds, and whereas I would say he's not as talented offensively as Armando Bacot, he's not quite the dominant defensive rebounder that Armando Bacot was either. He's a much better shot blocker than Armando Bacot was. And Armando was pretty good at shot blocking, great on the defensive boards. But Cliff Omori would be an unbelievable, just an unbelievably good fit for what Hubert Davis is trying to build in his 8, 9, 10-man rotation. Again, without adding a big man, the Heels will be very good. College basketball is a guards-driven game, and they're loaded there. But if they can add Cliff Omori on the transfer portal, again, it may happen as we're having this conversation. The Heels will not only be one of the favorites in the ACC next year, they will be among the top half dozen or so favorites in the entire country. King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach is the longest-running restaurant in New Hanover County. That's since 1947, and it recently was renovated to an impeccable degree by our good friends Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife, Keaton. Their outstanding chefs offer fresh local seafood, salad options, and creative, tasty variations of pork, beef, and poultry dishes. King Neptune has always been a great choice for dinner and or drinks, and now it's open for lunch and brunch too. Check out the lunch, brunch, and dinner menus at neptuneswb.com. That's Neptunes with an S, then WB for Wrightsville Beach. Again, the King Neptune Restaurant website is neptuneswb.com.
John Shire, in his second year, takes Duke to the regional championship game before falling to NC State. But year number 3 for John Shire is going to look a lot different than his sophomore campaign. A lot of new faces around the Blue Devils basketball offices these days.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's any reason to reach for a panic button, and I certainly wouldn't call it red flags or warning signs. But it's worth pointing out that what we just saw at Duke over this last month has never happened in the history of Duke basketball prior to now. Duke has never, ever lost 2 quality starting caliber players who were multi-year starters to the outgoing transfer portal. It's never happened. Now, we all know transfers, the number of transfers is setting new records every year. So it's not only Duke that is swept up in this phenomenon. But Jeremy Roach was a 4-year starter with the Blue Devils. For most of my 37 years covering Duke, I'd have been shocked if a 4-year starter for Duke finished his career somewhere else. Similarly, Mark Mitchell was a 2-year starter at forward for the Blue Devils. You don't see too many starters of any kind for Duke over decades of history leave the program voluntarily unless they're leaving for professional basketball early. So that's at least intriguing. And when you add the fact that in total, it's one thing when the guys who weren't going to play a lot leave. right? Jalen Blake's backup guard. It's okay that he leaves. Christian Reeves, big man who wasn't going to see time at Duke. He is on the outbound. Jaden Shute, a wing guard, just was probably never going to get many minutes at Duke. No problem. They're moving on. It's a win-win situation. They find more playing time somewhere else that they were never going to get at Duke. And, of course, Duke has those scholarships to work with on the recruiting trail, high school or otherwise. But when Sean Stewart, McDonald's All-American, coming off a solid freshman year, also decides to hit the transfer portal, and TJ Power, another prep All-American, 1 year at Duke, decides to hit the transfer portal as well. Well, now you have 4 total starters with eligibility remaining who have left. 2, again, they're going to be NBA first-round picks, Kyle Filipowski and Jared McCain. No red flag there. But when you add Mark Mitchell and Jeremy Roach, not as talented, but they could have been part of a firm foundation for John Shire as he enters year 3. Now, instead, Mark Mitchell's going to be representing Missouri, and Jeremy Roach is going to be representing the Baylor Bears. So that's going to be an adjustment, and of course, it's a reflection of the times in college basketball. But the fact that it hit Duke this hard, there's 11 total departures from Duke. When you add the guys who finished their eligibility, the guys going pro early, and all these outbound transfers, you only have 13 scholarship players. Duke is losing 11 of them. So who's back? Obviously, your starting point guard is Tyrese Proctor. He's now a multi-year starter. And they expect him to be a better version of himself next year as a junior. You do have another quality freshman, Caleb Foster, decided to return. That's it, Mike. That's the list of returning scholarship players for the Duke Blue Devils. I can promise you 11 departures in 1 year is as high as they've ever had at Duke, and 2 returning scholarship players is as low as they've ever had at Duke. And 2 starting players who opt to transfer out is the most they've ever had in a single year at Duke. I'm not sure we could name more than half a dozen outgoing transfers in Duke history who left behind a starting position with the Blue Devils. Obviously, as we've said on previous shows, Duke has the number 1 recruiting class in America coming from the high school ranks. Cooper Flagg is the number 1 high school player in America. Coach K's comments about him are at our website, ncsportsnetwork.com. When Coach K speaks of a guy as highly as Coach K recently did, you got to take that with a whole lot of weight on the words of the winningest coach in college basketball history. John Shire talked a little bit about Cooper on his most recent visit here on the David Glenn Show and the North Carolina Sports Network as well. I'm starting to learn the pronunciations of some of these other names, but I heard this man say his name himself. So I saw a video. His name is Kamen Malowich. That's how he pronounced it. He's 7'2", 250 pounds, 5-star high school player from the NBA's Africa Academy. Cooper Flagg is expected to be the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft in 2025. Kamen Malowich is expected to be a lottery pick at some point in the next couple of years as well. So those are 2 of the top incoming freshmen in the entire country, and there are more. You can check our work at ncsportsnetwork.com to find more details about the incoming freshman. Guy named Isaiah Evans of North Mecklenburg High School here in the Charlotte area. He's got an edge to his game. He's another 5-star, top 25 high school senior. And then the Devils did hit the portal. And whereas they've dabbled in the portal over the years, to me, these are better players than small role players like Orion Young that they got from Northwestern a couple years ago, who's now exhausted his eligibility. Malik Brown of Syracuse played 30 minutes a game for the Orange. He is one of the best defensive players in the entire ACC. He's a brilliant rebounder. He's an unselfish offensive player who actually shoots 70% almost from the field. A lot of follow shots, offensive rebounds, dunks. He doesn't seek his shot, but he's actually a pretty good passer for a big man as well. Lots of steals, nice block shots numbers. He's just an amazing all-around player that Duke signed out of Syracuse. And they also got the Big Ten's 6th man of the year, Mason Gillis of Purdue. We saw him in the Final Four as the Boilermakers eliminated NC State in that semifinal matchup. Zach Edey was the star of the show for Purdue. Mason Gillis is one of those guys who shot 47% from three-point land for Purdue this past season as a senior. He's exercising his COVID year. So Malik Brown, only a junior, Mason Gillis, a fifth-year senior. You're adding not only talent, but tons of experience and obviously different skill sets. Gillis, a really good three-point shooter and another good passer, actually, for a big guy. Those two guys can both play a power forward type role. Brown more inside, Gillis more stretch four types. But those are the two, to this point, additions on the transfer portal. And they go again with the number one high school recruiting class in the entire country. Duke, to me, I said this about the Tar Heels. They're preseason top 4 in the ACC, and they're probably preseason top 10 nationally. And they may not be done yet either, but the 10 guys that they have in the current rotation are 10 guys that John Shire, I think, can take a long, long way. The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by 3 actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up.
Well, the top school on Tobacco Road in 2023-24 was the North Carolina State Wolfpack. They're the ACC tournament champions. They made it to the Final Four. And Kevin Keats, yet again, is having to go back into the portal and cobble together a talented roster. And it does seem like that the excitement and the passion and the winning that the Wolfpack did at the end of the 2023-24 season is now starting to give some lift to the future of Wolfpack basketball as well.
Yeah, Mike, you and I heard Kevin Keats talk about how, I think to paraphrase his wording, recruits are noticing what we're doing as they won the ACC championship in Washington, D.C., and then they went on that another magical run to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. The latter part of that run, of course, happened exactly as guys were hitting the transfer portal. The portal didn't open until mid-March under NCAA rules. Again, it closed on May 1st. So you have a relatively compressed period. The early part of that period certainly caught the attention of much of America, all ACC fans that I know, but certainly going to catch the attention of entering the portal recruits too, proven college players who are looking for a new home. The downside at State is obvious, right? They just lost 4 of the 5 players who helped them make that magical run to the ACC title in the Final Four. We knew DJ Horn was out of eligibility. He is the best. He was the best get me a bucket guy. Every good team needs somebody when the shot clock is running down or otherwise, that even if the defense might think it knows what's coming, that dude's got some shake and bake to his game, and he's either going to create a shot for himself or draw enough attention to find an open shot for somebody else. That was DJ Horn for this magical Wolfpack that we all watched not too long ago. He has run out of eligibility. DJ Burns, the magical, amazing ballerina in the post, out of eligibility. Casey Morcell, very valuable defensive specialist and occasional offensive contributor, out of eligibility. Mo Diarra surprised some people by turning pro early. He had eligibility remaining, could have stayed with the Wolfpack. He is originally from Europe. They have a totally different way of looking at the amateur professional model over there. And because of that background, it didn't surprise me that he decided to turn pro, especially after he became a central part of why the Wolfpack went on that amazing run. Remember, when Mo Diarra was not starting at power forward, the Wolfpack looked like they weren't even going to be an NCAA tournament team for much of this year. There were games he only played 10 or 12 minutes a game. When he became that fixture in the starting lineup, that's when the Pack got on a roll and put together that amazing winning streak. before falling short against Purdue in the Final Four. So you lose 4 of the 5 guys that just took you to the promised land, so to speak. Michael O'Connell is a reliable point guard, but he's going to have to get used to a brand new cast of characters, including, and this is the good news, a bunch of incoming transfers that were quality double-digit scorers this past season at other schools. There's a guy named Marcus Hill from Bowling Green. He was first team Mid-American Conference, and he has some similarities to DJ Horn. DJ was actually a better three-point shooter to go along with that dribble penetration skill set. Marcus Hill's not a great three-point shooter, but he's a bucket getter, and he's got shake and bake to his game. He averaged 21 points per game for Bowling Green last season. He's a former junior college star. He's not a great passer. He's not as much of a combo guard as DJ Horn was, about as many turnovers as assists during that amazing season for Bowling Green last season. But I could see him starting next to Michael O'Connell. Oh, by the way, Jaden Taylor is back for another season with the Wolfpack. Mike James was a double-digit scorer at Louisville this past year. He's an incoming portal signee for Kevin Keatts. Dennis Parker Jr. is eligible to return for the Wolfpack. He was just a freshman this past year and a talented one before an illness sidelined him late in the season. Dontrez Styles, the former Carolina player, didn't play much for the Tar Heels, had occasional moments for UNC, but he's a Kinston, North Carolina guy. He left Carolina and transferred to Georgetown prior to last year, and he had a fantastic season for the Hoyas. He became the player that a lot of people thought he would be at Carolina. 30-plus minutes a game, 13 points a game for Dontrez Styles. He shot about 37% from three-point land. Just a good all-around player. 13 points, 6 rebounds a game in heavy minutes for the Hoyas. So he'll be a huge part of that rotation. He's kind of a swingman forward guy that you can play at the 4 a little bit. He's a big, strong guy. Brandon Huntley Hatfield was maybe Louisville's best player this past season in what was a horrible season for the Cardinals. But Huntley Hatfield is going to be probably the Wolfpack starting center in the aftermath of DJ Burns. This is a guy who played 30-plus minutes a game in the ACC last year, so you know it's against quality competition. 13 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, shot almost 60% from the field, even can hit the occasional three-pointer as a guy. He's not quite as big as DJ Burns girth-wise, but he's probably a 6'10", 240-pounder, and you need somebody like that. There were times this year where the Wolfpack got beat up on the defensive boards. Huntley Hatfield should be able to help a little bit with that. Not a shot blocker as much, so the Pack will miss Mo Diarra in that regard. But that is an example of Kevin Keatts hitting the transfer portal successfully this season, as we all know he did last year, because remember, fun fact, there had never been an ACC champion where the top 7 players were all major college transfers. That's what Kevin Keatts just did this past year at NC State. All 7 of those top 7 guys had started their college career somewhere else. There has never been a Final Four team in the history of the NCAA tournament until last year's Wolfpack. Kevin Keatts, I've shared this story before, got used to having to rebuild a roster every year when he was at Hargrave Military Academy in Virginia. He coached that prep team where you're not watching guys grow up from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year at the high school level. When you coach those prep teams, not just Hargrave, but there's a bunch of them around the country, you're basically refurbishing the entire roster every year. Now, we're not quite at that point in college basketball, unless you're Louisville maybe, right? You say goodbye to 12 scholarship players. You might say hello to 12 new scholarship players. That's like Hargrave. Kevin Keatts isn't quite at that extreme. He does have some of the guys back, as I mentioned earlier. Ben Middlebrooks, right, with O'Connell, with Jaden Taylor, with Dennis Parker Jr. They have a couple of solid high school recruits as well in Paul McNeil and Trey Parker. So to me, that looks like a team capable of becoming an NCAA tournament team again. Kevin Keatts went from the hot seat when he headed to Washington, D.C. People thought he was going to get fired whenever the Wolfpack lost up there, saved his job, perhaps, with that ACC title and then Final Four run. We know his contract now extends way into the future, so the air is out of that balloon, so to speak. But that roster I just gave you, O'Connell, Marcus Hill on the wing. Jaden Taylor as a good defensive player. Maybe he fills the Casey Marcel role. You got to build chemistry with all these new guys. Not all of those 7 transfers last year for Kevin Keatts were brand new transfers, right? DJ Burns had been a Wolfpack player for a couple of years. Casey Marcel was in his 3rd year with the Wolfpack after leaving Virginia. I do think there's a difference between the brand new transfer and the guy you've had for a few years. So O'Connell and Jaden Taylor and Ben Middlebrooks and Dennis Parker Jr. form a solid set of returnees, but I think they're going to have to lean hard on those portal guys, starting with Marcus Hill at guard, continuing with Dontrez Styles at forward, and then finishing, I guess, with Brandon Huntley Hatfield at center. It all adds up to, again, an NCAA tournament caliber team. And if the Wolfpack hadn't changed how recruits and others view them, I'm not sure that would have been possible for Kevin Keatts if the Wolfpack had not had that amazing run. He was right when he said that transfers were watching, and his Wolfpack team next year is going to benefit a lot as a result. Whether you are moving locally, nationally, or even internationally, and whether you're a residential or commercial customer, please consider our friends at EXL Moving and Storage, an award-winning Allied Van Lines agent with offices in Greensboro and Raleigh. Thanks to their 25 years of experience helping North Carolinians all across the state with their moving and storage needs, EXL has become the trusted hometown North Carolina moving services company. Our good friends Jim Dorsett and Jody Hatley, along with their hardworking staff, offer customized, tailored relocation and storage solutions to the people of North Carolina and beyond. Visit them online today at excelms.com. That's EXCELMS.com.
Last but not least, let's talk about the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Now, Steve Forbes is not the new guy on the block anymore. He's going into his 5th season in 24-25 at Wake Forest, and so far, he's not really had a lot of postseason success. He has gone into the transfer portal and got 2 guys that we've had on the North Carolina Sports Network, and Carr and Salas, and they're great, but they're now gone. And it's tough to keep things going in the right direction. And maybe the seat's starting to heat up a little bit for Steve Forbes. I mean, the Demon Deacons need to have some type of success, especially with NC State now joining North Carolina, and Duke as already being to Final Fours in this decade.
Yeah, at any school that cares about basketball, if you're going into your 5th year and you haven't made the NCAA tournament yet, there's going to be discomfort. There's going to be indigestion. And most Wake fans I know, most media members I know, most ACC fans who aren't even technically supporters of the Demon Deacons, everybody likes Steve Forbes. And the guy has done good things, right? They went to the NIT this year and won 21 games. They went to the NIT his 2nd year as well. But you got to kick the door down eventually. And I do think next year's Demon Deacons have a chance to do that. You mentioned kind of the bad news, right? Andrew Carr, to me, who has hit the portal and is headed to the Kentucky Wildcats, actually, that kind of shows how he was viewed in the transfer portal. To me, Andrew Carr was kind of like Jaden Zachary I mentioned earlier, the Boston College transfer who ended up at Clemson. Not quite good enough to make that 15-man All-ACC team, but, man, if we listed the top 20 or 25 guys in the league, Jaden Zachary would have been on it, and Andrew Carr, formerly of Wake Forest, to me, would have been on it this past season as well. So it hurts the Deeks that a guy who had a year of eligibility left and, of course, was a proven starting player for the Demon Deacons in Steve Forbes' system, it hurts that he's definitely gone. It's a little scary. Hunter Salas has maintained his the option to return to school. He is – a lot of ACC guys are just gone. They're not looking back. They're signing with agents. They're not testing the waters. They're pros. Hunter Salas has insisted that after his first-team All-ACC season, he is still considering a return to the Demon Deacons for what would be his 4th year of college after 2 at Gonzaga and this past year with the Deeks. Obviously, if he comes back, one of the 5 best players in the league, that would be a big boost for the Demon Deacons, the way R.J. Davis staying an extra year at Carolina is a huge, huge boost for the Tar Heels. So we got to wait and see on Hunter Salas. But the other Gonzaga transfer, Afton Reed III, is back as the assumed starting big man. Cam Hildreth, tough as nails, edgy wing player, is back for what will be his senior season in Winston-Salem. And I think the Deacons got even tougher with the signing out of the transfer portal of a first-team All-Sun Belt player named Trayvon Spillers that basketball fans here in our state of North Carolina got to enjoy for the App State Mountaineers this past season. Trayvon is a power forward stuck in a 6'7", 210-pound body. That doesn't sound like a huge guy, but he will scratch and claw and fight you like a dog on a bone for a rebound. And he scored about 13 points a game, 9 rebounds a game for the Mountaineers, played about 30 minutes a game, shot 60% from the field, can block some shots. He's an athletic defender as well. Maybe Trayvon Spillers starts at the power forward position that Andrew Carr just vacated. I mean, you got to earn all that in practice, obviously. But if the starting lineup, Mike, ends up being Hunter Salas at point guard, Cam Hildreth at the wing, Trayvon Spillers at the 4, Afton Reed III at the 5, and then you got to find another wing player. And the Deacs are still in the transfer portal, by the way. They have 4 scholarships still open as we're having this conversation. To me, that lineup gives the Deacs a great chance to kick down the NCAA tournament door for the first time in the Steve Forbes era. If Hunter Salas ends up staying in the NBA draft, and he's one of those guys that could have one NBA team tell him, hey, if you're there at number 20, whatever, we're going to take you. That's guaranteed money in the first round, guaranteed millions of dollars. Second round, again, no automatic guaranteed money. So the feedback to Hunter Salas sounds like it's going to matter to him as he makes his decision. You have until almost the end of May to withdraw your name from the NBA draft. Under NCAA rules, you can retain your college eligibility if you withdraw by, I don't have it in front of me. It's either May 27th or May 29th. It's May 29th this year. It's always near the end of May. So the Hunter Salas watch has to continue here in the month of May because that's a big fork in the road for these Demon Deacons. They are bringing in a recruit from Salisbury High School here in North Carolina named Juke Harris, who's a really good guard, that top 100 in the high school senior class. He should be able to help. And then I'm not sure what to make of these guys, but they added a couple of promising transfers. Trayvon Spillers is ready to help the Deacons. That's not a question. But an Iowa State transfer named Omaha Billieu was a McDonald's All-American, but he didn't play a lot this year for the Iowa State Cyclones. I love former McDonald's All-Americans just like everybody else does, but it's at least cause to look at somebody differently when they didn't play a lot in college. MJ Rice was a former McDonald's All-American that a lot of Wolfpack fans got excited last year when he signed with NC State. Guess what? He wasn't a big player on that team, and there was a reason he wasn't getting a lot of minutes for the Kansas Jayhawks after being McDonald's All-American. I don't claim to know whether Omaha is going to turn out to be everything he thought he could be or whether there are reasons he didn't quite click with Iowa State after being a McDonald's All-American year before last. We'll see. There's an Alabama transfer named Davin Cosby Jr., who, again, shows promise, but I think will be more of a role player for the Demon Deacons. The bottom line is Steve Forbes has work left to do in the transfer portal. And if Hunter Salas leaves, Steve Forbes has a lot of work left to do in the transfer portal. You and I have discussed many times. He's the whisperer. I mean, you can't ask for more than what he did with Tyree Appleby of Florida, turning him into an all-ACC caliber player year before last. Both Jake LaRavia and Alondis Williams, the 3 years ago, were phenomenal players for the Demon Deacons. Alondis Williams wasn't even like a full-time starter in the Big 12 before he signed with the Deacs, and then he ends up being the ACC Player of the Year. LaRavia was really good prior to coming to Wake, but he became an NBA caliber player by improving his game during his 1 year with the Demon Deacons, as it turned out. I have no doubt about Steve Forbes' ability to, A, find good fits for his system, B, get better versions out of these guys who may have been secondary players or role players, or in some cases played not much at all at their previous school. He's a good recruiter. He has signed Hunter Salas is another great example. Prep All-American in high school, didn't play huge minutes at Gonzaga. Some, wasn't buried at the end of the bench. Mark Few had reasons for not making him a full-time starter in his first 2 years. Steve Forbes saw something, and Hunter Salas becomes one of the best 5 players in the ACC. Wake needs more of that theme and formula to unfold. But as I look at their playing rotation right now, I didn't even mention Parker Friedrichsen. He's a promising young shooter who is also on the among the returnees. When you add it up, it looks like a good team to me right now. But to go from an NIT caliber team to an NCAA tournament caliber team, I think Steve Forbes has more work to do in this year's transfer portal.